Well, hello again, my friends. Welcome back to Grammie's Book Nook. Today, we're going to finish up the book that we've been reading for the past few days. If you remember, it's called Andre the Seal. And what an adventure the Goodrich family has been having, bringing up a baby seal. Again, this book is written by Lou Dietz and illustrated by Stell Shepis. So today we're going to start with chapter 12 and go right through to the end of the book. So everybody ready? Here we go. Andre had been an adorable baby and then a lively and very mischievous youngster. Now he was a dignified gentleman seal. Though he still enjoyed the applause of the crowd, he had become his own boss. And there were times in the summer when he just didn't feel like clowning around for an audience. One day, a relative of Daddy's phoned to say that he was bringing a group of friends to the Rockport waterfront. Having seen Andre perform, he said, "They don't believe a word that I've told them about Andre, so I'm counting on that seal to do his whole bag of tricks." That afternoon, Andre looked up at the skeptical faces on the seawall, and he decided that he didn't have to prove anything to anybody. He just sat there like a bump on a log, and he refused to even clap his flippers. My father was very embarrassed. When Andre was a pup, Daddy had to look out for him. But now, when my father went diving, Andre looked out for him. After all, seals have lived in the sea for millions of years, but people were just learning to be at home in the water. One spring afternoon, Daddy was diving in the harbor, looking for a lost mooring. Deeper and deeper he went into the dark, murky water, much deeper than it was wise to go. Suddenly, something grabbed him from behind. Startled, he reached for the knife he always carried when he was diving and swung around, not knowing what to expect. And there was Andre in a high state of agitation. He began pushing Daddy toward the surface, telling him that it was all very well for a seal to dive that deep, but for a human being, it was dangerous. I remember the day Andre refused to wear a harness. For a time, my father thought that seals should be trained to perform useful tasks. After all, St. Bernard dogs have been trained to pull a child's wagon, and for centuries, elephants have been trained to move great logs with their trunks. Daddy had trained a number of seals to wear a collar or a harness and to carry lines out to the boats. In most matters, Andre was very obliging, but he drew the line at wearing a collar. He looked at the thing in disgust, flatly refusing to have one put over his neck. And no amount of coaxing or stern words would change his mind about that. Oh my goodness, he could be a stubborn little thing. My father impatiently threw the collar on the deck and went ashore, but immediately he regretted his childish behavior. Why should he insist upon Andre's doing something beneath his dignity? Andre was a friend, not a servant. When Daddy returned to the pen to offer his apologies, Andre was waiting in portly majesty with the collar around his neck. He had put it on all by himself, apparently just to please Daddy. Daddy never again asked Andre to wear a collar. Andre's fame had been growing with each passing year. The summer crowds at the seawall grew larger and larger. School children came by bus from all over Maine. Whoops. to see Andre. Boatloads of youngsters came from outlying islands to watch Andre perform. Not only did Andre remember all the tricks he was ever taught, he actually thought up new tricks of his own to please the crowds. There was the seagull act, for instance. Seagulls always arrived at feeding time, hoping for a free meal. Daddy would toss a herring out over the water. Andre would plunge off, snapping up the fish before the gull could reach it. If he failed to do this, he would simply leap out of the water and snatch the herring from the gull's beak. He seemed to really enjoy proving that a harbor seal was much smarter and much faster than any seagull that ever lived. One day during a performance, a little rowboat got loose and began drifting away from the dock. Daddy yelled, "Andre, get out there and bring that boat back." And like a porpoise, Andre leaped forward, took the line in his teeth, and brought the boat back to the dock. Afterwards, this became one of his favorite tricks. Since he swam underwater when he was towing the boat in, it looked quite spooky to see a little boat moving along without any motor or without any man at the oars. Finally, the great day came when Andre was named Honorary Harbor Master of Rockport. For some years, my father had been Rockport's official harbor master. Now, wasn't it fitting and proper, our town manager thought, to make Andre his honorary assistant? I think it's going to say assistant. And it does. Andre accepted his badge with quiet dignity. He liked the honorary part because it meant that he wouldn't be called upon to do any hard work, and that suited him just fine. Never before had a harbor seal been so honored. But by no means was Andre ready to rest upon his laurels. Now it was time for Andre's great adventure. Well, I wonder what that's going to be about. Chapter 13. It's called The Old Mariner. Of all the seasons, summers are remembered best, and there were many happy summers before Andre set forth on his great sea adventure. There were some bitter winters as well, and it was during those long winters that Andre learned about the great watery world that lay beyond the bay where he was born. He was off on his own for weeks at a time. Like the voyages of Maine sailing ship captains, his explorations took him to far places. Like them, too, he learned to know the wind, the tides, and the currents. Old-time sea captains sailed by the stars, but no one knows how a seal finds his way home. Andre had a seal's way of knowing where he was and where he wanted to go. Certainly he knew his way home, and home was where he came every spring. Now and again he would return to see us deep in the winter when the wind and tides broke up the ice in the harbor. One cold day, in the middle of February, he came home in a style that befitted an honorary harbor master. Howard Kimball, whose lobster boat had been icebound for a week, was working on his wharf that afternoon. Earlier, he had called the Coast Guard, asking them to send in an ice-breaking vessel to clear a channel in the harbor that would allow him to fish for crabs. As the boat approached, he waved to the captain and thanked him, and the Coast Guard captain waved back as they went by, and then he shouted something that Howard couldn't hear above the sound of the crunching ice, and jerked his thumb toward the stern of the boat. "Harry," Howard told Daddy later, "I couldn't believe my eyes. There was Andre in the wake of the vessel. He was swimming in the open channel and putting on quite a show. He was leaping and diving among the ice cakes. Well, you might have thought that the icebreaker had been brought in to clear the channel just for him. His winter visits were brief. After saying hello, he would take off again for parts unknown, but each spring he arrived when the ice had melted. How he enjoyed romping around as the boats were put back in the water and the floats were set out again. Following a long winter alone in the open sea, he seemed to hunger for human activity and people's company. Then, just as everything seemed to be working out perfectly, Andre got himself into some serious trouble. It happened in the spring of his 14th year, a few weeks before his pen was put in the water for the summer. Free in the harbor, he came upon two young men in a canoe and decided it would be fun to play. In his exuberance, he capsized the little boat and the two men were forced to swim ashore. Luckily, they were good swimmers, but what if they hadn't been able to swim? And then a few days later, a man and his wife were out in a kayak in the bay. Now a kayak is even more easily tipped over than a canoe. Andre, nipping at the paddles and diving under the delicate little boat, so frightened the man and his wife that they didn't think that they would get home alive. Scuba divers became another problem. Scuba diving was now a very popular sport, and more divers were in the waters around Rockport. Many of them were strangers. Imagine being deep down in the water and suddenly find yourself being hugged by a 200-pound seal. Daddy was fearful of what might happen should a diver panic. He was also worried about Andre. Many of the divers carried spear guns, and surely those underwater hunters were not used to seals that wanted to play leapfrog. They might think that they were being attacked. Daddy got the pen over quickly and placed Andre in it. My father knew that he must seriously think about Andre's future. According to the law, Andre was my father's responsibility. All of us Goodrich children were growing up, and one day we would go and be off on our own. But it was clear by then that Andre wasn't to go off on his own for good. As long as he lived, he would be my father's responsibility. One of the first questions people would ask Daddy is, how long do seals live? And he would tell people, no one really knows how long a seal lives in the wild. In aquariums, seals have been known to live to the ripe old age of 40. Even if Andre lived to be only 30, that was a long time for someone to be responsible for his actions. Having thought about this all summer, my father reached a decision in late August. He phoned Dr. Garibaldi at the New England Aquarium in Boston. I'm Harry Goodrich in Rockport, Maine, he said, going right to the point. You know, the fellow with the seal? How would you like to have a winter boarder? Dr. Garibaldi certainly knew all about our famous seal. Well, if you're talking about Andre, we would love to have him. We'll come up with a truck and get him whenever you say the word. And of course, we'll truck him back in the spring. Then my father said something that startled all of us. Oh, you won't have to deliver him in the spring. I want Andre to swim home to Rockport. I'm sure Dr. Garibaldi was as startled as we all were. Are you serious? I said to Daddy when he hung up the phone. Of course I'm serious, he said. If Andre is going to be penned up both in Rockport and in Boston, don't you think that he needs some freedom? He's a very smart seal. If he wants to come home, you can be sure that he'll find his way. Well, but But I stammered, well, what if he doesn't want to come home? We're just going to have to leave that decision to Andre, was Daddy's answer. Chapter 14, The Great Adventure. On a raw, gloomy day in early November, a small crowd had gathered at the waterfront by noon when the truck arrived from the New England Aquarium to take Andre away. Out of the van stepped Bob Anderson and a pretty young lady named Annie Potts. They were members of the aquarium staff who would watch out over Andre in Boston. Everything went smoothly. The men took a slatted carrying cage and a rowboat out to Andre's pen. Andre plopped into it without any fuss at all. He seemed relaxed and unconcerned as he was carried up the steep ramp into the waiting truck. When he was loaded aboard the truck, my father said, "You're going on a vacation, Andre," and he put his head against the slats of the crate so Andre could say goodbye. Andre sniffed Daddy's hair, for that was the way seals say hello to friends. Now, this was a hello and a goodbye. Oh my goodness. The rear doors of the van clanked shut, and the truck went off the steep hill to the village, and Andre was gone. Everything was going to be all right, I told myself. Andre would be safe. He'd have other seals to play with, and children from all over the world would come to see him. At least I hoped that was the way it would be. All the same, it was a relief to learn a few days later that Andre had arrived safely in Boston. "Everyone has fallen in love with Andre," the aquarium man said on the phone. "In fact, he's taken over the place. There's only one small problem," he said. "Another seal here, named Hoover, is sulking because Andre likes his lady friend." Later that winter, Daddy flew to Boston to see for himself how Andre was faring in the big city. We were all waiting eagerly for news when he stepped into the house that evening. "He seems to be having the time of his life," Daddy reported, "swimming around in the tank with his lady friend. When I called his name, his head popped up and over he came to see me." Satisfied that I was the one and only Harry Goodrich, he went back to join his friends. "But doesn't he miss us?" I asked. "Oh, I'm sure he does," my father said. "We'll know in the spring just how much he misses us now, won't we?" When spring came at last, Andre was to be released to make the long swim home alone. He would be free to roam the seas or to return the only family he had ever known. I didn't dare guess what he would decide to do. Now it was entirely up to him. The date was set, and he was going to be released on April 26th. The aquarium people thought it would be best to set Andre free at Marblehead Harbor, 20 miles north of Boston, where he would be meeting less ship traffic. Daddy agreed readily, for Andre had once visited Marblehead when he was a seal pup. Surely he would know his way home from there. My father notified all the newspapers about the coming event. He wanted to be doubly sure that everyone along the coast knew that a friendly seal called Andre would be swimming north all the way to Maine. Of course, some people doubted that our well-traveled seal would make it home to Rockport. I was sure he would, for I kept remembering the day he dived for my coat buttons and dropped them at my feet. Whatever else Andre was, he was a very, very smart seal. Daddy flew to Boston on that special day and rode with Andre in the van that took him to Marblehead. A 40-foot fishing boat was waiting at the dock, as were reporters and photographers. After Andre was carried aboard the boat in his cage, the fishing boat captain freed his lines. Everyone was excited, but not Andre. He had lived such a strange life that he didn't even know that this was unusual. When the fishing boat had sliced a few hundred yards out into the harbor, the aquarium man said to my father, "You say where and when, and we'll set him free." "Well, what's wrong with right here?" Daddy asked, and he opened Andre's cage. Andre came humping out. He looked at Daddy and swooshed. Right into the sea he went. Just once he looked back. "Okay, Andre," my father ordered, "you go home." And Andre dived under the water, jumped up, flipped his flippers, and off he went. And then he was gone. When my father arrived home late that night, he hung up his hat and lit his pipe. "Well, now he's on his way," he said. That was all, nothing more. Only when I was ready for bed did I ask the question that was most on my mind. "Daddy, how long will it take for a seal to swim all the way from Marblehead back to Rockport?" I thought this was a very good question, but I didn't get a very good answer. "Well, how long does it take for you to walk home from school?" And I said, "Well, I could walk home in 20 minutes, but some days I stop for an ice cream cone or to visit with a friend," I said. "So it all depends." "Well, that's the same with Andre too," Daddy said. "It all depends." So once more the waiting began. It seems that my story of growing up with Andre is filled with waiting. But this time the waiting was brief. The first report came the very next day. A man phoned from Kittery Point, 50 miles north of Marblehead. "Hey, are you that fellow with the seal he wanted to know?" "Yes," Daddy said. "I'm Harry Goodridge." "I think I saw your seal," the man said. "He was resting on my dock, and I patted him." "Well, if you got close enough to pat him, that's our Andre all right," my father said. Then there was no word for the next 2 days. On Tuesday morning the phone rang again. A girl who lived just around the point from Rockport had sighted a seal. Daddy thanked her, though he doubted that she had seen Andre. How could a seal possibly travel all that distance in just 4 days? But he was wrong. An hour later, a man called saying that he had sighted a seal at Owl's Head, closer to home. Then another man called saying that he had seen a seal in Rockland Harbor, closer still to home. Daddy dashed for the freezer. Filling a pail with fish, he rushed down to the waterfront, where he waited in vain for over an hour. He was home having lunch when a neighbor telephoned. "Harry," he exclaimed excitedly, "Andre's home. He's asleep in our rowboat." We never did finish lunch that day. In a few minutes we were all in Father's boat and chugging across the harbor. And sure enough, there was a weary Andre, curled up in a rowboat. At the sound of our outboard motor, he raised his head over the side and looked at us sleepily. "Well, hello there, old fellow," Daddy said, offering him a fish. "How was your trip?" Andre showed no interest in being fed. For 4 days he had traveled on homeward, and now all he wanted to do was sleep. Later that day, after a long rest, he slid gratefully into his waiting pen even as people all over the country were reading about him in their newspapers. Andre makes it home were the headlines in the newspapers all around the country, in San Francisco, in New Orleans, in New Jersey, in New York. Everywhere people were reading about this magnificent seal, so happy that he found his way home from Boston to Rockland. We sat and talked to Andre until the sun went down and the seagulls were flying out to their night roosts on the islands. And then I knew for sure that this was home to Andre, and I'd never need to worry about him again. Chapter 15 is called There Will Always Be an Andre. Alice, of Alice in Wonderland, had this to say about telling a story. You start at the beginning, and when you get to the end, you stop, she said. Well, this isn't the end of Andre's story, of course. Now, however, Andre is very famous. Everyone in the country knows about the harbor seal who swims home from Boston each spring to spend the summer in Rockport, Maine. As far off as California, people read in their newspapers that Andre has left the aquarium in Boston for his long swim home. And thousands of people await anxiously until they learn that he has arrived safely in our little harbor. We're never quite sure about Andre's exact time of arrival. One spring, he made a record trip in just 3 days. Some years he decides to dawdle along the way, sightseeing and making side trips along the coast. One spring, it was a good 2 weeks before he showed up in the harbor. But we no longer worry about him. Since everybody knows about him, people who see him along the way telephone us, and he is always glad to be back, and he always happily slips into his pen. Andre will soon be 20 years old. His coat is turning gray. He is wise in the ways of the sea, and wise about people. When he lies down dozing in the sun, does he think wise thoughts? As I said at the very beginning of this story, I'm never quite sure what exactly is going on in Andre's head. Does he know that he's as famous as Flipper the dolphin? As celebrated as Smokey the bear? Does he know that he's the only harbor seal in the whole wide world who lives in 2 worlds and swims home to Rockport from Marblehead every spring? He should have guessed he was something quite special one glorious day in October. A famous sculptor carved a 2-ton granite statue of him and donated it to the town of Rockport. The real Andre was there the day of the unveiling. Bands played, children cheered, and there, carved in stone, larger than life, was Andre looking seaward toward the island where he was born. I don't suppose it matters that Andre doesn't really understand what all the fuss is about. He dozed. What matters is that a beautiful statue of him will be looking out to the sea forever. Now, come what may, there will always be an Andre. The end of the book. I hope you enjoyed all the adventures of the Goodrich family and Andre the Seal. And some of you may be wondering, is Andre the Seal still alive? Well, Andre the Seal passed away when he was 25 years old, but he had a really, really good life. It was such a beautiful experience for the Goodrich family to enjoy a pet and a friend like Andre. Maybe some of you at home have special pets that you love and care for too. so you can appreciate a story like this. Well, the next time we get together, I've selected another book for you that is not a chapter book. It's a picture book, but I know that you're really going to enjoy it, no matter how old you are. And before I sing our hand washing song for today, I've been thinking a lot about many of you that I know personally. Some of you come to visit the Book Nook that I've never had the pleasure to meet, and I'm really glad that you're here. And I hope that I get the chance to meet you someday soon. But some of you I know, and you know how very special you are to me. So I want to teach you a funny little song that I taught to my children when they were small. And I know that it went into their hearts, and I'm hoping that the same thing is going to happen to you. Are you ready? Here we go. I'm a VIP in my family. I'm a VIP, you see. I'm a VIP in my family, and that's a very good thing to be. A very important person, a very important person, a very important person, that's me. I want you to remember that song. And I want you to remember to sing it to yourself, because everyone is special. We all have something to give, and we all have people who love and care about us. So just remember that you are a very important person. So let's finish up. I don't have any sleeves to pull up today, but maybe you do. So if you do, sleeves up. Are you ready? We're gonna wash those germs away, strong and healthy every day. I make wise choices so I stay well, and I wash those germs away. Oh, we wash those germs away, staying strong and healthy every day. We make wise choices so we stay well, and we wash those germs away. Oh, we make wise choices in every way, and we wash those germs away. Okay, I'm going to say goodbye for now. Can't wait to see you next time. Bye now.